In the 1920s, it's essentially often regarded as the golden age of America, specifically because of the economy, better known as the Roaring Twenties because of economic prosperity. People had lots of money and spending was high. It was also the introduction of jazz and swing dancing, a pretty popular and versatile decade, but it soon ended. When the 1930s rolled around, that same momentum was not there. The economy actually crashed. Look at this headline from the Pittsburgh Press. Quote, huge losses in Wall Street, sales set all-time record. This is from the Vanguard. When will the depression end? This one is from the Klamath News. Stocks lose $10 billion in a day. When the stock markets crashed on October 29th, 1929, known as Black Tuesday, that was just the beginning of the crisis here. Over time, people got worried and started taking their money out of the banks in droves, leading to many foreclosures. Massive unemployment, and also a lot of people ended up on the street, standing in line, essentially begging for jobs to scrape up any kind of money that they could to feed their starving families. And the president of the United States at the time was this guy, Herbert Hoover. He had been elected in 1928, defeating New York Democratic Governor Al Smith in a landslide election. So there was a pretty huge mandate. Imagine winning that big, 444 to 87, completely shellacking your opponent in that election. Now that is a landslide. That's what we call a mandate. But when he actually became president, and it came time to address a national crisis like the Great Depression, Hoover was actually quite terrible. And even just using that adjective is being generous to him. I mean, he believed that the federal government should reduce its role. Therefore, if Americans are suffering economically, they should practice self-reliance, which is not something people want to hear. Imagine not being able to feed your family or losing your job or your bank closes and all of your money was in it. And that's what you're hearing coming from the White House. Washington isn't going to even try to help to do something about it. Fix it yourself. And so after major pushback about it, he started telling businesses, please don't cut wages and encourage private charities to help those who were unemployed. But again, he still strongly believed in that fix it yourself mentality. But by not giving federal relief to Hoovervilles, which were homes that were so poorly built that they were named after him. And as things got progressively worse in the country, two senators got together to see if they could fix this. Two senators got together and decided we are going to fix this problem in America because, Americans are struggling. So how can we bring relief to Americans? And they drafted up a piece of legislation called the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. And it was successful legislatively. It passed both the House and the Senate. And before it even got to Hoover's desk, economists were like, no, do not sign it. Do not sign that. Please, this is going to cause an even greater economic calamity. This will be economically deadly. And they basically said, if you sign this into law, it will trigger a global trade war because if we put tariffs on other countries, they will in return retaliate and put counter tariffs on us. They will retaliate with counter tariffs of their own, which of course would cripple international trade and worsen the depression because anyone who understands any basic level of economic education understands that. But Hoover did not listen. And all hell broke loose across the globe. Canada, our largest trading partner at the time, as it exported 80% of products to the United States, raised tariffs on over 16 U.S. products, including fruits, vegetables, coal, and machinery. Guys, remember, the Great Depression is happening. And Canada has just raised tariffs on 16 U.S. products, including food, which people are struggling to get at the time because Hoover signed this bill into law. I mean, because of that, U.S.-Canadian trade dropped by nearly 50%, devastating both countries, but more so the United States, as we had to pay for that and go shopping in the grocery stores and see those high prices as a result of this. Europe responded by raising their own tariffs on American goods. France imposed high tariffs on American cars and agricultural products. Britain completely shut down U.S. exports. And Germany increased tariffs as well. Latin America cut off the exporting of sugar, coffee, and oil to the United States and turned to European markets to sell. Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, Japan, all these countries responded in economic retribution because of what we did. This trade war was so bad, it made things significantly dire at home, that when it came time for Americans to vote again, Franklin D. Roosevelt was elected president 472 to 59. A resounding victory in which, after taking office, he had to reverse much of that damage done and restore international trade relations with our allies. It turns out putting tariffs on our allies doesn't work. If we are suffering internally, we should work to resolve the problem internally. Putting tariffs in place essentially is deliberately creating an external crisis that will not resolve the internal one you are dealing with. It doesn't work. Nobody wins. It becomes a long-winded, drawn-out trade war that ends in recessions, high prices, and unemployment. On the 2024 campaign trail, both candidates laid out their economic plan for the United States. Economists said that Vice President Kamala Harris's plan would be better economically because it would also cause less inflation as opposed to Trump's, which would not only increase inflation by 70%, but also invite a recession by the middle of 2025. But this is something that he incessantly reiterated, that he would put a 200% tariff, 25% tariff, big tariffs in place because that's what was going to save the economy. And it was also in the way that he naively and nonsensically promoted it. I'm going to put tariffs in place and make the other countries pay. They're going to pay for it, and we're going to have so much money flowing into the USA. That's not how tariffs work. I don't know who told Trump that. That's not how tariffs work. Other countries do not pay tariffs. We pay the tariffs if we're putting it on other countries. I mean, we are the consumers, right? So the way this works is we are the consumers. Imported goods coming into the United States, we pay for that, of course, when it goes to our grocery stores and stuff. But in effect, if you put tariffs on the countries that export stuff to the United States, and of course it's coming in, so that's importing, we pay for that because we are the consumers. And the United States does a whole lot of importing, as you can see on this map here. And you might remember when he became president last month, those tariffs on Canada and Mexico were supposed to go into effect. And that stopped. It was paused for 30 days after essentially a deal was reached. And now that those 30 days are up, Trump is back on it, announcing that he will put tariffs on Canada and Mexico effective today because that's a great thing to do. I want to show you this because this is quite jarring given the historical parallel here. When Herbert Hoover disregarded that sound alarming, essentially warning from economists, and signed that tariff bill into law, the Dow Jones fell 15%, ending at 228.73, which is in the trenches from an investor standpoint. And as Trump was speaking yesterday, announcing these new tariffs, look at how the Dow Jones is actively crashing. Just look at that. Look at the Dow Jones actively crashing, and he's speaking, announcing these new tariffs. Ultimately, the Dow Jones dropped nearly 650 points yesterday. This is how it looks this morning as you wake up to it. I mean, guys, the markets have crashed. In response to these new tariffs, this is a press release from Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Quote, Canada will not let this unjustified decision go unanswered. Should American tariffs come into effect tonight, which they have, Canada will effectively, at 12:01 a.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow, respond with 25% tariffs against $155 billion of American goods, starting with tariffs on 30% $30 billion worth of goods immediately and tariffs on the remaining $125 billion on American products in 21 days' time. Our tariffs will remain in place until the United States trade action is withdrawn, and should U.S. tariffs not cease, we are in active and ongoing discussions with provinces and territories to pursue several non-tariff measures. While we urge the U.S. administration to reconsider their tariffs, Canada remains firm in standing up for our economy, our jobs, our workers, and for a fair deal. Because of the tariffs imposed by the United States, Americans will pay more for groceries, gas, and cars, and potentially lose thousands of jobs. Tariffs will disrupt an incredibly successful trading relationship. They will violate the very trade agreement that was negotiated by President Trump in his last term. Promises made, promises kept, right? But at what cost? I mean, I should also mention that the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, is also implementing a 100% tariff on Teslas. Stick it, Elon Musk. Of course, this comes at a time when Tesla car sales worldwide are just collapsing. Because it's not just that he's ruining things here, he's also butting his head and interfering with foreign elections in other countries, as France's president and other European leaders have talked about and warned about. Doug Ford, Ontario, Canada's premier, threatened to cut off U.S. electricity to several American states. Quote, "If they want to try to annihilate Ontario, I will do anything, including cutting off their energy with a smile on my face." China will impose additional 15% tariffs on U.S. goods, and Mexico's president will be announcing her response. She did announce her response effectively. I wrote the script last night. I woke up this morning. Mexico's president said that she's going to be responding with the new tariffs on Mexico by, 25% tariffs as well for the United States. So that is going to go into effect. Once again, look at this map of the countries that the United States does the most trading with. In terms of these countries import the most goods to the United States. We have just put tariffs, a 25% tariff effectively, on our allies. So that's Canada, that's Canada, that is China, that is also Mexico. And based off this map, anybody who lives in any of these states is going to be hurting economically because of what just happened. Promises made, promises kept. But you understand, you see, this is actively destroying the economy. Watch what this does to the economy. The stock markets are already reacting. That's the first sign that something big is about to happen. A recession is on its way, effectively. Economists were not lying. In the 1930s, when they told Hoover not to sign the Smoot-Hawley tariff bill, they were not lying when they told, effectively, the American people that, hey, if you want a good economy, if you want things to get better, vote for Vice President Kamala Harris. Do not vote for Donald Trump. You're going to be in an economic catastrophe if you elect Donald Trump into office. And it turns out there are millions of idiots who live in this country, apparently. People who barely understand basic research and the fact that basic research is available for us, and that this election had so much more bigger implications than just two political candidates. This election was quite literally an insurrectionist versus an overqualified person to become the next president of the United States. Overqualified. She served in the legislative, the executive, and also in the judicial branch. But also had an incredible plan for this country if we're elected. And, looking back on that history there, this historical analogy of Hoover and what Hoover did, we are now in a situation where the stock markets have reacted quite literally in the same way. You do not put tariffs on our allies. That's not going to help us. You do not put tariffs in place to fix an internal crisis. And may I just mention that Joe Biden had an incredible economy. He had a fantastic economy. The only thing that you guys were feeling essentially was, Trumpflation, because this is the way that it works. Going back through the history books here, when George Bush was president back in the early 2000s, he left office with a horrible economy. He gave that economy to Barack Obama. Barack Obama gets into office, fixes the economy, and then effectively we get Donald Trump after 8 years of a nearly fantastic, perfect economy with Barack Obama. Donald Trump inherits Barack Obama's economy, does not build on it, instead crashes that into the ground as COVID, happens as well, and leaves office with a terrible economy. So when Joe Biden becomes president, people who don't understand economy wrongly misrepresent that as Biden being the economic problem president, when the economy was actually fantastic under Joe Biden. And he worked very, very hard to rebuild that. And of course, that great economy that Joe Biden built, sometimes it's felt 4 years later or a year after that president's out of office. And we're not going to feel Joe Biden's economy. We're not going to feel that great booming economy that Republicans like to take credit for after crashing the last one. This is going to hurt Americans. This is going to specifically hurt Donald Trump's own supporters. Yet they are still going to clap. They are still going to celebrate, even as they are suffering. And this is something that lots of people are going to have to contend with because the midterm elections are coming up. And you sort of have this weird thing happen in the United States where the pendulum swings back and forth. But what I wish the American people could understand from a basic logical standpoint is that you cannot keep swinging the pendulum back and forth. This is no longer normal politics. It's no longer Republicans versus Democrats. This is MAGA versus Democrats. This is MAGA versus democracy. That's what you're looking at. Anyone who understands basic economy knows that Democrats are better for the economy and Republicans are not. But Republicans take credit for Democrats fixing the economy and act like it was them that did it. And the voters just buy it every single time. Specifically Republican voters. Stop believing the lies. Stop believing the delusion. Republicans are not good for the economy. 25% tariffs. Prices are about to skyrocket. And you can't say you weren't warned if you voted for him. But also those who didn't vote for him, the pain will also be felt in ways that are just absolutely devastating.